Good morning, students. Last class we had started the first chapter of your book Moments. The chapter's name, The Lost Child, wherein we met a small child who is very happy, very ecstatic to go to a fair with his parents, and he actually is mesmerized by whatever he sees on the way towards the fair. Here we also see how the author of the story, Mulk Raj Anand, has beautifully described nature, the bounties of nature, with its beautiful gifts, with its beautiful creations, which actually stimulate the sense organs of the small child. And we also see how the author has given a very picturesque description of the Indian rural village, which celebrates the advent of springtime. So it's a festive season. And this child, he, poor child, he wants everything. Whatever he sees on the way, he is awestruck. He wants each and everything. And the parents, they have a constant no for every wish of his. I have already told you they are not harsh, but they just want him to draw a line between wishes and reality so that he understands what's a wish and what's a reality, what's being in a dreamland and what's being in a practical world. So we continue from here. Now you see they were on the way towards the fair. Now they are actually uh, in the fair. Okay. As they neared the village, the child could see many other footpaths full of throngs converging to the whirlpool of the fair and felt at once repelled and fascinated by the confusion of the world he was entering. This world is the fair. We have already discussed this paragraph last class. Now, in the fair, a sweet meat seller hawked. Hawked is shouted. So this seller who is selling sweets, he hawked, he shouted, Gulab Jamun, Rasgulla, Barfi, Jalebi at the corner of the entrance, and a crowd pressed round his counter at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets. So various sweets have been displayed, okay, decorated with leaves of silver and gold. The child stared open eyed, and his mouth watered for the barfi that was his favorite sweet. Poor child, barfis are his favorite, okay? So, like his joy, it reaches its climax once he sets his foot in the fair. And his eyes are glued to the barfis. He's so fascinated by the barfis because those barfis are his favorite sweet. I want that Burfi, he slowly murmured. But he half knew, as he begged, that his plea would not be heeded. So he half knew. Maybe the other half said that the father would agree to his proposal. But then one half knew that it would be rejected. So one half knew, as he begged, that his please request would not be listened to because his parents would say, You are being greedy, so it's bad. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. So you see, he did not demand that burfi. He just murmured. He said to himself, okay, a kind of whispering to oneself. So he just murmured. He was not loud enough. He could not cough out his desire because he knew that somewhere his father is going to reject his desire of having that burfi. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. A flower seller hawked. So the second stall is a flower seller. He hawked a garland of gulmohar, a garland of gulmohar. The child seemed irresistibly drawn. He went towards the basket where the flowers lay heaped and half murmured. So again, he half murmured, and the flowers were so beautiful, so irresistible. I want that garland. But he well knew his parents would refuse to buy him those flowers because they would say that they were cheap. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. Now you see, when he saw those burfis, he did not actually demand. He knew that somewhere uh, his desire, somewhere his um unrealistic demands would not be heeded upon. So he just murmured to himself. Now you see, he does not have any ill feelings for his parents, but he knows them very well. He knows that no, they would find out some reason and prove me wrong, or they would find out some reason to justify themselves that my demands are not so appropriate. So he accepts the thing. So when he sees those flowers, he again murmurs to himself that he wants that garland. But he well knew his parents would refuse to buy him those flowers because they would say that they were cheap. Now you see, cheap over here does not mean cheap that is less price, like not so expensive. Cheap over here means useless. Like the next day they would decay, the next day they would be of no use. So they were cheap, the flowers were cheap. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. A man stood holding a pole with yellow, red, green, and purple balloons flying from it. So, the third uh, thing that his eyes catches attention is a man selling balloons, colorful balloons. The child was simply carried away by the rainbow glory of their silken colors, and he was filled with an overwhelming desire to possess them all. Notice one thing, how Mulkraj Anand describes each and everything. Like he gives such a detailed description, such a picturesque description of everything. The Gulmohar flowers, the sweets, and over here you have the balloons. So the way he describes, you can just picturize them. You can just visualize all these things in front of your eyes. So a rainbow glory of the silken colors, the balloon, so many colorful balloons, and he wanted to possess all of them. But he well knew his parents would never buy him the balloons because they would say he was too old to play with such toys. So again, he consoles himself with some reason. Which reason? The reason that he thinks that his parents would justify themselves. So he says that again, my parents would say that these balloons are not the perfect toys for me. Why? Because they are apt for kids. And the child thinks that he is a grown up now. So he was too old to play with such toys. So he walked on farther. Now comes a snake charmer. Stood playing a flute to a snake which coiled itself in a basket, its head raised in a graceful bend like the neck of a swan, while the music stole into its invisible ears like the gentle rippling of an invisible waterfall. Oh my god. See, the way the snake has been described, you can again visualize everything, and there has been a generous use of figures of speech. We saw last class how he has used a metaphor, simile, then an alliteration, and you see over here again there are two similes where the snake, the head, this head of the snake has been compared to the neck of a swan, while the music stole into its invisible ears like the gentle rippling of an invisible waterfall. And the music has been compared to the invisible waterfall. So, over here, the beauty of the snake, who is that is actually listening to the music of the flute and responding to it. The child went towards the snake charmer, but knowing his parents had forbidden him to hear such coarse music as the snake charmer played, he proceeded farther. So, again, poor child, he again gives himself a reason. that this music was little coarse and his parents would never appreciate that. So he did not even murmur anything. This time he did not even murmur. We could see when he saw the sweets, when his eyes caught the sweets, he murmured to himself that he wanted burfis. When he saw the flower seller, again he murmured to himself. Balloons he did not even murmur because he knew that there was a ready made reason of saying a no. When he sees the snake charmer, again he does not murmur because he knows very well that over here, see, he has now seen four things. There are four things which he has seen till now. For the first two things, he actually half knew. But for these two things, like for the balloon seller and for the snake charmer, he completely knows, he totally knows that his father would never agree to the proposals of these two requests specifically. So he does not even murmur. Now, there was a roundabout in full swing. Men, women, and children carried away in a whirling motion, and they were so happy. They shrieked and cried. Shrieked is shouted, and cried with dizzy laughter. Dizzy laughter, dizzy like when you have that giddy feeling, nauseatic feeling. So, with that dizzy laughter, the child watched them intently. And then he made a bold request. So this time it was not half suppressed. This time it was not a murmur. This time actually he uttered a sentence. Okay? He uttered few words. This time this was a bold request. So see, this roundabout actually attracted him most. That is why he could not uh, suppress his fear and anticipation. That is why, what did he do? He was determined to have his share of joy. And he took a risk and he gave a very bold request. I want to go on the roundabout. Please, father, mother. So this time it was a request which was actually enunciated from his mouth. He uttered these words. Okay, this time it was not a murmur. So he said, I want to go on the roundabout, please, father, mother. There was no reply. Now there was no response from his parents' side. He turned to look at his parents. They were not there. Ahead of him. He turned to look on either side. They were not there. He looked behind. There was no sign of them. A full deep cry rose within his dry throat, and with a sudden jerk of his body, he ran from where he stood, crying in real fear, Mother! Father! Tears rolled down from his eyes, hot and fierce. His flushed face was convulsed with fear. So, when he saw that there was no response from their side, he actually looked everywhere. But then he could not see them. And he was totally shattered. He started crying. He could feel those tears, which were very hot and fierce, and his flushed face was convulsed with fear. Flushed, red face, okay, was convulsed. He's totally panic stricken. He's very scared as to he cannot understand what has happened. So he frantically searches for his parents. Panic stricken, he ran to one side first, then to the other, hither and thither, here and there, in all directions, knowing not where to go. Just feel his helplessness. A big fair, like full of people, with confusion everywhere, he does not know where to go to. Where would he search for his parents? Such a big fair it is. So, the fear overpowers him and he goes crazy, and tears are like uncontrollable. He simply starts crying. Now, what does he say? Mother, father, he wailed, he cried. His yellow turban came untied, and his clothes became muddy. Must be a Punjabi Sardar, so he has that yellow turban which came untied. Okay, So it was tied and now it's untied. Having run to and fro in a rage of running for a while, he stood defeated, his cries suppressed into sobs. So you see, what did he do? He kept on running, but then finally he stood defeated because, like, they were all in vain. He could not see his parents. He could not find he could not find them. So it was he felt defeated, and that is why you see his cries suppressed into sobs. He was crying. He could feel those tears. But now sobs became predominant. These sobs, they became predominant and the cries were suppressed by the sobs. So you know the difference between crying and sobbing? Crying is like, it's a fretful, when you sobbing fretfully is crying. um, there will be a noise, you'll open your mouth, and that's crying. The extreme of crying is wailing, and sobbing is like just when your nose gets blocked, that's sobbing. So the cries got suppressed into sobs. Now what happens? At little distances on the green grass he could see through his filmy eyes. Now, why filmy eyes? Because he is sobbing. So his eyes are welled with tears. So his eyes are filmy because he cannot see things very clearly. So, filmy eyes, men and women talking. He tried to look intently among the patches of bright yellow clothes, intently, very seriously. With full concentration, he tried to identify those people. But then there was no sign of his father and mother among these people, who seemed to laugh and talk just for the sake of laughing and talking. Now, see, he could see few people who were laughing and talking, and he tried to identify them, but all futile. He could not find his parents because his parents were nowhere to be found. Now, they were laughing and talking, but for him, he felt as if they just seemed to laugh and talk. They were actually enjoying. But you see, over here, he is in a very tragic circumstance. That is why he feels so. He ran quickly again, this time to a shrine to which people seemed to be overcrowding. So, where did he go to? He went to a shrine, that's temple. Every little inch of space here was congested with men. So, not an iota of space was left. Like, it was totally thronged with people. The temple was totally thronged with people, but he ran through people's legs. He jostled his way out, his little sob lingering. The sob was still there. We came across this word lingering, remember, on the second page? So it remained. The sob was still there. Mother, father. Near the entrance to the temple, however, the crowd became very thick. Men jostled each other. Jostled, they tried to find out their way by pushing others. Heavy men with flashing, murderous eyes and hefty shoulders. You see, I guess he's trying to uh, give us a picture of a typical Sardar, heavy men, murderous eyes. Now that does not mean the eyes who have eyes that have murdered someone. Murderous eyes means very big eyes and red eyes, okay, shining eyes. So murderous eyes and hefty shoulders, strong shoulders. The poor child struggled to thrust a way between their feet, but knocked to and fro by their brutal movements, he might have been trampled underfoot, had he not shrieked at the highest pitch of his voice, "Father! Mother!" So, he is a small boy and he is in a crowd, he is in a dense crowd. So, there was a moment when he would have been trampled, he would have been crashed like a just imagine when stampede happens, like in a temple or outside a some temple, mosque. So in a fair you generally come across such incidents. What happens? Okay, so he felt as if he would have been crushed, he would have been trampled, but then he suddenly shouted at his highest pitch, Father, mother! A man in the surging crowd heard his cry and stooping with great difficulty. Now, why did he stoop with great difficulty? Because you see, it's crowded, people are jostling. So, stooping is also very difficult. So, somehow the man managed to stoop. Why? Because he had to stoop, because this boy had fallen down. He is a small boy. So, he had to stoop. He lifted him up. So, this good man, this stranger, lifted him up in his arms. How did you get here, child? Whose baby are you? The man asked as he steered clear of the mass. So he moved out of the mass of the crowd and he questioned him. The child wept more bitterly than ever now and only cried, I want my mother, I want my father. I do not know whether this happens to you or not. Suppose you are in a very dejected mood, you are very sad, and you are sobbing, you are not crying, you are about to cry. But then someone comes to you and asks you, what has happened? Like you seem to be very depressed, you seem to be very low. What has happened? Why are you so gloomy? Please tell me. And when we find that we have got a shoulder, we start crying all the more. So he bursts into tears. Now his sobs are not suppressed. He started crying more bitterly. He started crying fretfully. And he said, I want my mother, I want my father. The man tried to soothe him by taking him to the roundabout. Will you have a ride on the horse? He gently asked as he approached the ring. Now, why is he doing so? Because he wants to console the child. Okay, he wants to soothe the child, pacify the child. So he just asks him that whether he would have a ride on the horse or not. Now, this is the same horse ride. This is the same roundabout. Remember, yes, on this page you see the roundabout. So this is the same thing that he had earlier actually wanted to take a ride. So he says, by taking him to the roundabout, will you have a ride on the horse? He gently asked as he approached the ring. The child's throat tore into 1,000 shrill sobs, and he only shouted, I want my mother, I want my father, as if he wants to say, why cannot you understand? I just want my mother and I want my father. Now you see the excitement and the childish awe, the fascination for every other thing vanished without any shadow. Why? Because fear has become predominant in that mind of this innocent child. So you see, it's a very small story. But see, just a while ago, he was so excited. And now he is minus all excitement, minus all happiness. Because his love for his parents was more than anything else in the world. Okay, so he just says, I want my mother and I want my father. The man headed towards the place where the snake charmer still played on the flute to the swaying cobra. Listen to that nice music, child, he pleaded. But the child shut his ears with his fingers and shouted his double pitched strain, I want my mother, I want my father. The man took him near the balloons, thinking the bright colors of the balloons would distract the child's attention and quieten him. So, that is why I told you in the first class, this man, what I feel, is a very good man. Now, you see, this is an open ended narrative where we are left to decide or we are left to resolve the story in our own perspective. But I think this man is going to help this boy because see, he's trying his best to distract him. So he takes him to the colorful balloons and he asks him if he wanted a rainbow colored balloon? He persuasively asked. The child turned his eyes from the flying balloons and just sobbed, I want my mother, I want my father. You see, those same sentences like I want this, I want that, I want this, I want balloons, I want burfis, I want to listen to the snake charmer's flute. I like so many wishes. He had a list of desires and wishes, now all shortened to one sentence: I want my mother, I want my father. Now, this clearly shows his inherent love for his parents. And a child's love for his parents is always more than anything else in the world, which is dormant in his subconscious inner mind. You know, we at times have so many complaints against our parents, like our parents do not understand us. Uh, my friends understand me. Our parents are like, they are so dictative and they are so like always instructing us and ordering us. But just close your eyes and you know there is that love in your subconscious mind. So this love remains dormant, dormant, like in a very um, dormant. Seeds are dormant, like not bloomed, sleeping. Okay, so dormant in our subconscious mind, that finds its expression. This love actually finds its expression after we lose something. And that is why, I always feel that we should understand the value of certain things before we lose them, because it becomes too late then, isn't it? That is why, remember, on in the first class I had told you that spring is very symbolic. What did I say? Spring is actually rebirth. Rebirth, and things are again born, the dead things are resurrected, they are rejuvenated, they get refreshed, they get washed, and everything is green and so prosperous again. So you see, spring is very symbolic in this story because this festival becomes an eye opener for this child. This festival of spring, this fair, which actually celebrates the advent of spring, becomes an eye opener for him, where he actually realizes that he is nothing without his parents, where he rejects all those things which he had wanted earlier. When the which he had wanted earlier, he rejects all the things, and what does he say? He just wanted his parents. So you see, this is the rebirth of the child's understanding. He comes to know, he comes to realize the value of his parents after he loses them. And you see, the incidents are so logically placed over here. Like the man is on a reverse journey with the boy. Now both of them see the same things. What the little boy saw a little while ago, but in a reverse order. Okay. So after the balloons, the man, still trying to make the child happy, bore him to the gate where the flower seller sat. Bore him, took him to the gate where the flower seller sat, and he said, Look, can you smell those nice flowers, child? Would you like a garland to put round your neck? So this angel like man, he again asks him that would you like a garland? A little while ago he had craved for one. So he said, "Do you want one?" To which the child turned his nose away from the basket and reiterated his sob. Reiterated, repeated. This is a very good word for repeated. Reiterated his sob. I want my mother. I want my father. So he kept on sobbing and he said, like he wants to say, please try to understand, I do not want these things. I just want my mother and I want my father. Thinking to humor his disconsolate charge by a gift of sweets, the man took him to the counter of the sweet shop. So, thinking to humor, what's humor? Thinking to appease, thinking to make the child happy. Now, the child has been described with the word disconsolate charge. So, disconsolate, someone who cannot be consoled, because see, it's so hard to console him. Disconsolate. Charge, charge is his responsibility. And who is his responsibility? The child. Okay. So, it's he thought to humor, he thought to bring some happiness to this disconsolate charge. Disconsolate, the child who could not be consoled, the child who could not be pacified. By a gift of sweets, the man took him to the counter of the sweet shop. What sweets would you like, child? He asked. The child turned his face from the sweet shop and only sobbed, I want my mother, I want my father. So he does not have any interest in the sweets, not even his burfis, his favorite ones. So he just says that please, please try to understand. I just want my mother and I want my father. And the story ends here. I've already told you it's an open ended story where you are given the freedom to decide what happens next. But you see, before we conclude or before we come to any conclusion, we don't you feel sorry for this child? Like, it's so painful. See, all his desires remained unfulfilled, and on the top of it, he lost his parents. So, the fear which had actually made him so ecstatic, made him so happy, so jovial, now has become a burden for him because this fear took away his parents. This fear did not even fulfill his desires. So he he remains so helpless. Now that is up to us whether we like, if we conclude that this man is going to help him, because see, if he is a small child and if he is able to tell his father's name or the name of his village, the man most probably would help him. And the man, I think, will help him. Like many of us think that no, the man has some evil intentions in his mind and he would take advantage of the situation and he would not help the child. But then it's already so disheartening, isn't it? Till now, it has been so disheartening and it has made us feel so sorry for the child. Why to give it a sad ending? Why not think it the other way around? Because you see, if there are bad people, there are good people. We are surrounded with good souls too. And maybe this man is actually going to help him. But you see, one thing which we understood is that the child became helpless. He became so weak without his parents. Because, and this child was so energetic, this child was so vibrant, this child was so enthusiastic, so fervent when he was actually going towards the fair. That means whatever strength, like the utmost strength in the child to explore happiness in the world or in the worldly things, lied somewhere in the togetherness with his parents. And now that his parents are nowhere to be found, you see, all his strength has been just eroded. He is left so weak, he is left so helpless, and he does not want anything. And these were the things which he actually cried for, isn't it? So, give it an end, give it a beautiful ending. Apart from these questions, there are like 5 questions. The first question I had already given you the last class. Do question 2, question 3, 4, and of course question 5, which asks you, what do you think happens in the end? Does the child find his parents? Now you see, please think for a while and maybe your thoughts would differ from mine. So feel free to express yourself. Like, it should not be as if I have asked you to be positive, or I have told you that this man is surely going to help him, so you are bound to write that answer. No, you are free to express yourself. Just ransack your brains, ask yourself, but feel and write. Because when you feel and write, you actually come to a very strong conclusion. So conclude it in a manner, in your manner, but then think logically. Do not give illogical answers, but then it should be your answer. Okay, it should be your thought. With this, we complete the chapter, and next class, most probably, we'll do question answers from this chapter. Thank you.